Parish Police Jury for Thursday, September 22nd, 2016. Going to have the invocation and the pledge by Mr. Scott. Please stand.
Father, we thank you for being able to gather here tonight. We ask that you just give us wisdom and guidance. We just thank you for all you do for this state, this parish, and this country, Father. We ask tonight that you give us your blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Madam Secretary, roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Anderson, have another nomination. This
You need to look at mine.
10, Mr. Barrett.
Here.
Mr. Brame.
Here.
Mr. Collins.
Here.
Mr. Farnum.
Here.
Mr. Guidry was unable to attend. Mr. Guillory.
Here.
Mr. Hunter.
Here.
Mr. Latour.
Here.
Ms. Mayo. Here. Mr. McMillan is out of town this evening. Mr. Scott.
Here.
Mrs. Trimmy was also unable to attend. Mr. White.
Here.
And President Landry.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Cathy. Item 4, take appropriate action on applications for liquor and beer permits. Mr. Crane.
Mr. President, we have 5 applications before you tonight. We recommend they be approved.
Move to approve. Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Farnum, a second by Mr. Collins. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 5, consideration of approving payment of all current invoices.
Move to approve. Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Andropont. He normally does that. Motion by Mr. Brame, second by Mr. Latour. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Actually, that's kind of funny when you don't hear him there. He always makes that motion for probably the last 17 years for sure. Item 6, consideration of approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the police
Move on
jury
6.
dated August
Second.
18, 2016. Got a motion by Mr. White, second by Mr. Farnum. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 7, appearance by Mrs. Mary Warner, candidate for Louisiana Public Service Commissioner. Ms. Warner, if you would, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon. Mary Leach Werner, 800 Bayou Oaks Lane, Lake Charles, Louisiana. Thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. I want to thank the members of the jury and all the administration for having me. I'm Mary Werner from Lake Charles, and I'm a candidate for the Public Service Commission for District 4. District 4 encompasses all the parishes from Cameron and Calcasieu to Catahoula and Sabine across to Iberia, 17 in total. We have never had a public service commissioner from the parish of Calcasieu, and now I think it's more important than ever. So I came before you to tell you a little bit about myself and address you this evening. My background is in small business as a representative of our family business, Sweet Lake Land and Oil Company, located here in Calcasieu Parish for over 125 years. I've been involved in business development directly and worked with our wildlife lodge, fishing, farming, ranching, and commercial real estate. I bring a unique set of skills and qualities to serve at the Public Service Commission because I also represent a company located here in Calcasieu that is publicly traded. So in dealing with our energy companies that are public companies, I understand regulation that's put upon them and can represent and work with them well. As the economic leader in Louisiana, Calcasieu needs representation in Baton Rouge. Unfortunately, for the last several months, our own commissioner, Mr. Holloway, has been very ill. And I ask everyone's thoughts and prayers for him and his family as he begins his retirement from the Public Service Commission. And his staff here in Calcasieu and across the district has done a remarkable job and represent us well, taking care of our residents' issues. But we can no longer wait and have our agenda pushed back, because as the economic leader of Louisiana, we have far too many issues. And I know all of you understand those probably better or as well as I do. We need someone who can work with Entergy, CLECO, Beauregard Electric, Jeff Davis, all the co-ops, all the energy companies, to make sure that while we experience this tremendous growth that's unprecedented across our state, our residents and our small businesses are well represented and taken care of. We need infrastructure build-out and security. We can't let our grids be at risk for all the residents here and the tremendous industry we now house as a leader in the world. And I will work as your commissioner to ensure that this happens. Another point that is extremely important and close to my heart is education and economic development. As a volunteer in education for over 15 years, I see the trends in technology taking over our schools. and I am determined that Louisiana school children will not fall behind any longer. If we do not ensure that every household in every part of our parish and all our parishes has access to affordable internet and broadband, our children cannot keep up, nor can our small business owners. And we all know, especially in the rural parts of this parish and the other parishes, the economics are built on our small business owners. Who can access their bank accounts, their lines of credit? Children can't access their homework, send it in like it's expected to be done nowadays, unless they're at school. So I want to see that our economy, our education is addressed from the Public Service Commission. Our legislature is going to be kind of busy for the next few years, and internet is on its way to being declared a public utility. So the Public Service Commission has to be foremost in working to ensure that all residents of Louisiana are treated fairly, that things are not put on them economically, and everyone has equal access. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you today. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for all your service you give. You are a shining example to the rest of the state of a well-organized jury, and I thank you for that. Thank you to my friends. Many of you have been have reached out to me, and I appreciate that. I ask for your vote and your consideration to be the first Public Service Commissioner to represent Calcasieu Parish on November 8th, number 75. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Is there any questions from the jury? Thank you. We appreciate you being here. Item 8, appearance by representatives of Laguna Development Corporation regarding the recently announced acquisition of the Isle of Capri Casino facility. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Skip Sayer. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm the Chief of Sales and Marketing for Laguna Development Corporation.
You have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for the opportunity to stand up and talk to you for just a few minutes this evening. We came to Louisiana, and we've been spending this week in Louisiana introducing ourselves to the community. We're a company that believes in community involvement, that believes in a strong corporate standard in terms of commitments to the communities that we live and work in, and this is the start of what we know is going to be a great adventure. I've brought with me tonight, first of all, one of the founding members of our company. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jerry Smith.
Jerry.
Next to Jerry is Ken Mimak. Ken is our Chief of Business Development. For all intents and purposes, you'll be seeing a lot of Ken over the next several months. He is our man on the ground in terms of our operations and logistics as we prepare for the transition of the Isle of Capri Lake Charles and ultimately take the keys to the property, what we anticipate next year. And certainly key to that part will be somebody that many of you, I'm sure, know. He's currently the General Manager of Isle of Capri Lake Charles, Mr. Paul Hutchins. And Paul is working with us as well on this project. Arwen Baskell and Judy McCleary are representing us from the perspective of political and public relations. So we put a team together here in Louisiana and in New Mexico for something that is a watershed moment in our company, and we're very excited about. Where do I need to point?
I think you. There it is.
Ah, there we go. I promise to be very brief, so please don't take my brevity as anything other than the understanding that your time is limited, and so we want to give you a very quick picture, and if we have a couple minutes for questions or any comments at the conclusion, we certainly would love to hear them. LDC is, as I said, based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We operate casinos, restaurants, entertainment venues, travel centers, convenience stores, and we operate a grocery store for the community of the Pueblo of Laguna. There are 8,000 tribal members in Laguna, of which 4,000 live on the reservation in New Mexico. We have a proven track record of success in New Mexico. It's one of the most competitive gaming markets of the country, and certainly Lake Charles is also one of those. So we feel very fortunate to be able to come into this market and compete vigorously and successfully. Our management team has an average of more than 20 years of experience in the hospitality industry, and we do have strong support from our shareholders in the Pueblo of Laguna, who have invested substantial equity in this deal to make this acquisition happen. Want to tell you just very quickly our plan coming into Calcasieu Parish, coming into the Isle of Capri, Lake Charles. Phase 1 involves a commitment of about $18 million in capital improvements. We look forward to injecting some renewed energy into that property. It's been there for 20 years, as you know, but we want to do 3 things to begin with. First is to invest money in slot machines. The slot product there is ready for an upgrade, and we certainly think that's critically important to the success of that business. Secondly, bringing food and beverage, new food and beverage offerings. We are in the process now of doing consumer research and finding out what you and folks here in Louisiana and in a key market, which is Houston, Texas, are thinking about this market and these offerings and what's available and how we can make that new and exciting for the customers that come here to enjoy the casino resorts. And last but certainly not least, we understand we will have to rename the property. We do have a licensing agreement with Isle of Capri for up to 12 months after we take the keys to the facility. We hope to accomplish that name change prior to the 12 months, and Isle of Capri certainly wants us to do that as well. It's going, am I pushing the wrong button?
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
My fault, my fault. So that was phase 1.
Right.
Phase 2 is, in a long-term plan, is to convert our existing casino to a single-level dockside gaming facility. We know that's the direction that Riverboat Gaming has been going for quite some time, and that's certainly something we would look at in our long-term planning. Really, we wanted to come and introduce ourselves and meet face-to-face with the folks that are so entranced in this community. We have a number of things another of commitments that we've made coming into this deal. One is to retain all employees in good standing. We don't have a management team or a lot of employees waiting in New Mexico to come and take jobs in Louisiana. So we're looking forward to working with the folks that are there. A strong brand is something that has served us extremely well in New Mexico, and we look to establish that at the Isle of Capri under a new brand. The quality slot product I talked about. We provide an excellent food product, very award-winning in New Mexico, and we certainly look forward to bringing that here. And as I said, we have a very stable, very engaged management team with experience in both publicly held as well as Native American casino gaming. So we think that this fits our profile extremely well, and we can come in and operate this property very successfully. In summary, we commit to a standard of excellent corporate citizenship. We've certainly done that in New Mexico, where we are very well known for our commitment to education through athletics, with the opportunity to allow the Native American kids and kids throughout New Mexico to enjoy athletics as part of their academic achievement. We have a strong operating ethic, and we maintain a high level of operating integrity in all of our businesses, and we'll certainly do that as we dedicate capital investment to this community and to this property. We think that our #1 contribution to this community to begin with is continuing to make this business successful and to grow it, to generate jobs, to generate economic activity, economic vitality, to Calcasieu Parish, Lake Charles, and Westlake, and the surrounding area. And that's what we're here to tell you about tonight. And again, thank you for the opportunity to introduce ourselves and speak for a few minutes. And we'd be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments if there are any.
Mr. Farnham.
Well, welcome to Southwest Louisiana. It's good to hear that you've got a good, strong commitment to the community, and I hope that that commitment goes on to utilize the workforce, the service providers, the local vendors, as much as humanly possible, because that's where you can best benefit the community as a whole, is by using locals. And we really hope that y'all can make a commitment to that.
I think we agree. Thank you.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. President. Could you expand a little bit when you said single level gaming, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you called it? Could you expand a little bit on what that means? Right now is gaming on 2 levels at the Isle of Capri?
It's actually on 3.
It's on 3, okay. So would that be a renovation of the existing boat or a new boat?
Actually, you would move it to a new facility. I guess the best way to describe it is to think about our competitors just across the lake, the Golden Nugget and LaBerge. Those would be the kind of single-level facility that I'm describing.
So the possibility for a brand-new boat is a possibility?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Is there any further questions for Mr. Sayre? No? Thank you, Skip.
Thanks again for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Welcome. We're glad y'all are here. Okay, item 9 is 6 o'clock. We'll come back to that.
Item 10 been deferred.
Bear with me, we have a technical problem.
Here you go, Chris.
Mr. Hafer. Should have never got rid of the paper. My computer has locked up and it will not do anything. Here, I'll go this way. Thank you, Jessica. We don't need the computer after all. Okay, item 10, staff requests that this item be deferred to the regular meeting on October 6, 2016.
Second.
Who was the motion from?
Mr.
Motion by Mr. Collins, second by
That's right.
Mr. White. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 11, consideration of adopting a resolution
Move on 11.
authorizing Waterworks District Number 8, Awards 3 and 8, to proceed with issuance of not to exceed $2,200,000 of taxable water revenue bonds for development of a project for acquisition and establishment of additions and improvements to its waterworks system. Had a motion by Mr. Latour, second by Ms. Mayo. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 12, take appropriate action on a request by Wesdale Properties of Sulphur LLC to amend ordinance number 4882 and to remove stipulation number 2 that the use is for a daycare facility only at 188 East Telephone Road in Ward 1.
Move to defer for 30 days or uphold planning and zoning.
Planning and Zoning Board met on Monday, July 18, 2016, and voted unanimously to recommend that the request be deferred. I have a motion by Mr. White to defer and a second by Mr. Collins. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 13, take appropriate action on a request by
Move to defer till
Dalton
the
Langford
October
edX
6th
to
meeting.
rezone from agriculture to recreational vehicle park to allow a recreational vehicle park of 14 spaces at 4007 and 4009B South Douglas Parkway in Ward 4. I have a motion by Mr. Farnham and a second by Mr. Collins to defer for, you said 30 days?
Till the October 6th meeting.
Till October 6th meeting. Is there any discussion? Any objections?
The 20th is what the,
What date do we want? Mr. Farnham said October
I think
6th.
October 6th is the next meeting.
That's the motion. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 14, take appropriate action on a request by Clyde Connor edX to rezone from light commercial and general commercial to recreational vehicle park to allow a recreational vehicle park of 20 spaces at 4215 Broad Street in Ward 3. The Planning and Zoning Board met on Tuesday, September 20th, 2016, and voted unanimously to recommend that the request be granted with stipulations. I got a motion by Mr. Collins and a second by Mr. Latour to approve with stipulations. Mr. Collins?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion?
Me.
Mr. Gilry?
Yes. Which part of Broad is this going to be on? For the east, where they removed all of the old ones?
It's right before the city of Lake Charles. You know where their facility is on Broad? I think it would be just to the west of that facility.
Be on the east of the corner, on the corner of Goodman Road and Broad Street.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, we'll go ahead and go to item 15, which we will probably have to,
We're gonna have to skip that.
probably won't have time to finish it. Take appropriate action on a request by Stan L. Floyd to rezone from general commercial to recreational vehicle park to allow a recreational vehicle
overturn
park of
planning and
30
zoning.
spaces
Second.
at 6015 Bro Road in Ward 7. The Planning and Zoning Board met on Tuesday, September 20th, 2016, and voted 5 for and 4 against to recommend that the request be granted with stipulations. Have a motion by Mr. Barris to overturn Planning and Zoning and a second by Mr. Farnum. And we have a number of speakers. Did you tell me 10?
10.
Okay. Normally, when we have this many speakers, if y'all want to get together and have a spokesperson, if you do that, we'll give you 10 minutes. Otherwise, we'll go like two minutes apiece is what we'll do. And I'll have to hold you to that or we'll go way over. Mr. Crane.
You might want to ask the applicant.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have done that before we get to that. Okay, is Mr. Floyd here? Do you have a spokesperson, Mr. Floyd? Okay, if you could come up. Thank you, Mr. Bowling. Mr. Floyd, if you could state your name and address for the record.
My name is Stanley L. Floyd, and I live at 433 East Letcher Drive in Orange, Texas.
All right, thank you. Mr. Floyd, you have the floor, and if you would, please tell us about your development and what you're asking to do here tonight.
Yes, sir, I do have 7.5 acres on the end of Bro Road in Vinton. It is a dead-end road, so there is not a heavy traffic there at all. My observation over the last 4 or 5 years, the residents on the road, there are limited children. Most of their children have all grown up. And there's only 4 homes on that road that have a rebuttal. I think it's an excellent place for my project. I do plan on this being adult, working-class people there. And, we've had a professional to draw it out and do our engineering. We're not crowding the RVs. We're actually giving more space than what you require or the average park. And I know some of the people on that road. I've done business with them. I understand human nature. We're all subject to change. Nobody wants to make change. They have comfort zones they want to stay in. So I understand their feelings, and I'm amazed how many people are here to speak when there's only 4 families that live on the road. That piece of property, as you see on the TV, is interstate on one side, so there's no one to bother there. On the back side of the property, there's a couple 100 feet of forest-type property. And I think it's a great place. It's going to be good for the economy. It'll help the economy in Vinton. I just think it'll be good. It's a good place. It's going to be a great park. And I want to add, I do have my facility in Orange, Texas. I brought 35 palm trees all the way from Florida, from the county that I was born and raised in Florida, prior to going into the military. And I take pride in everything being clean, neat. I'll put palm trees, oak trees, some cypress trees in there, and I'll make it a very nice facility. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Floyd. Are there any questions for Mr. Floyd from the jury? Mr. Scott?
Mr. Floyd, if you don't mind, how long have you owned this property?
I think between 4 and 5 years.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Is there any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Floyd. Okay, let's see, we have Lisa Broussard Patrick.
Yeah, 1 minute for 6 o'clock.
Yeah, we do. I tell you what, Ms. Patrick, I hate to get you started and then 30 seconds later, I'm going to have to cut you off, and I don't want to do that. So just bear with us for just a moment, and we will call you right back up. We're going to go back to we are, item 9. We will in a second. You ready, Mr. Gabb? There we are, at 6 o'clock. Item 9, hold a public hearing at 6 p.m. as advertised in accordance with law and serve as the Board of Review to hear protest on current tax assessments. Mr. Gabb.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once a year, we come as the police jury, as a Board of Review for assessment protests. Ms. Aguilar, as the assessor, will advise you on these items, and there are a list of protests. Your job is to listen to the evaluation that Ms. Aguilar was going to give you. If it's reasonable, you have the right to affirm that assessment. The protesters will also have a chance to explain their case, and at that point, you can either, again, accept the assessment, or you can modify the value of the assessment. With that, Ms. Aguilar will give you the cases.
Thank you, Mr. Gabb. Before we get going, does any of the jury have any questions for Mr. Gabb before we get started? Guess not. We'll probably be back to you. Ms. Aguilar, please state your name and position with the parish.
Wendy Curfey Aguilar, Calcasieu Parish Assessor.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, jurors.
Evening.
I know we have some new jurors. Welcome, and thank you for having me. As you may or may not be aware, once a year we do this. You guys come together as a group and you serve as the Board of Review for any protests here in Calcasieu. The Board of Review sits for the property owners who decide that they wish to challenge their assessment valuations. A property owner or their representative can review their valuation of the property during open book. So we have 2 weeks that are established by LTC guidelines and the state law that allows a property owner or their tax rep to, or whoever they authorize, to view their property and determine if they would like to challenge their assessed value. And during that 2-week period, if they determine that they would like to challenge their value, they can appeal to the Board of Review, which is you guys. And once they appeal to you, we convene the Board of Review at this time frame for you to review their challenge. If you uphold values or change values, it can then be challenged to the Louisiana Tax Commission. You have a little problem? Do I need to hold up?
No, no.
Okay.
No, Carrie.
They can either challenge onto the tax commission and/or they can go ahead and challenge to the court if they choose to do so. The important part to remember is that the challenge is of the assessed value, okay? So we're going to start with, and I gave you a little kind of breakdown. We're going to start with Aaron's Inc., and I don't believe there is any representatives from Aaron's Inc. here today. If you look at your table of contents that my great administrative assistant put together for you, that would be purple. Aaron's Inc. is a leasing company. They are protesting statewide. Basically, they're misinterpreting the law. They lease home computers and couches and things like that. And so what they want to do is have their inventory exempt from taxation. And by law, it is a taxable property. However, they're misinterpreting the law that says if you, as a homeowner, have a couch or a desk or a computer in your home, your personal asset, that is not a taxable property. However, this company leases that property, and until that lease is satisfied, until that property is completely paid for, that property still belongs to that business, and therefore, it is still part of their taxable inventory. So I respectfully request that you will uphold my valuation on this property.
Valuation.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Hunter and a second by Mr. Scott. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this item? And actually, while we're speaking of that, we have no blue slips for item 9. So if someone is here for item 9 and you wish to speak, you need to fill out a blue slip and hand it to someone here at the staff desk. Okay, we had a motion and a second to uphold Ms. Aguilar's recommendation. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Carry on, Ms. Aguilar.
Okay. Down here. The next one is Prague Leasing, which is in yellow. Once again, that is the same situation, misinterpretation of the same type of situation. They're a leasing company, and they're doing the exact same thing. They are leasing property to owners and want their inventory to be tax exempt. It is not until the lease is completed, and that then becomes that property owner's property. It, as an inventory item, it is still an asset that needs to be taxed. So I would respectfully request that you uphold my valuation on this
Move
property.
to uphold valuation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hunter, second by Mr. Collins. Mr. Gilreath.
Ms. Aguilar?
Yes.
Are these businesses, have they been in business a long time?
Yes.
So they wasn't taxed before?
They have been being taxed before. This is the first time they've protested under this idea that they should not be paying taxes on these properties. They've paid taxes before this way. Honestly, they have a new tax rep that's handling these particular properties, and I believe this is just something new that they're trying across the state. And they're protesting almost in every parish across the state. I believe that this is going to end up at the tax commission this year for most parishes.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Gilreath. I have a motion by Mr. Hunter, second by Mr. Collins. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Yeah, for all of us I'm in the inventory business, and I wish I was exempt, but you just keep sending me the bill, so I don't think I'm going to.
Well, actually, that would be Mr. Mancuso that sends you the bill.
You're right, yeah. And I'm worried about the collection part. That's why I send the check.
Okay, so the next one would be Mr. Shaheen, and I don't think that Mr. Shaheen is here, I don't believe. Okay, and that would be orange. And so Mr. Shaheen has several convenience stores, and what you will see is an initial letter and several letters back and forth between Mr. Shaheen and I. What I did not include, just because it was so much for you guys in your packet, is initially that Mr. Shaheen sent me a very large packet of information where he had gone to the GIS website. We did work, one of our focus groups for the 2016 reassessment, we worked on convenience stores because we had a large percentage that was out of ratio. So we worked on convenience stores, and he felt like we had, and I did include his letter, he felt like that, I think from the GIS, that we had unfairly reassessed him. What he failed to realize, and what I explained and what you will see in your documentation, he was looking at the GIS website, and that GIS website, which is not maintained by my office, is only updated quarterly, so those values had not been changed yet. But I did inform him that the properties that he had sent me had been changed, and I provided him that information. And I did request from him to provide me anything that he had, appraisals or any kind of documentation that I could help him with his valuation if I've made any kind of mistakes or anything like that. So I have not heard back from him at this point. I'm waiting to hear from him if he would like to continue to work with me on his valuation. So I would respectfully ask that you uphold my valuations.
Move to uphold valuation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hunter, second by, well, Mr. Barris. We do have discussion. Mr. Farner.
When was the last time the properties, 12 was when they were supposed to be reassessed. Last time, were they done in 12?
Commercial, okay, so,
Or are they supposed to be done every year?
no. No, the state mandates that we look at properties at least every 4 years. Okay, so 2012 was the last state mandated reassessment. But the tax commission comes in every year and does a ratio study. Now, they pick and choose what they do ratio studies on. 1 year they may come in and do land sales. 1 year they may come in and do commercial sales. 1 year they may come in and do subdivision sales. And we have no way of knowing what they're going to come in and do. And if they come in and they do their ratio study and a parish fails, and I'm sure that you guys probably saw some of that with Beauregard Parish, because Beauregard Parish has been in the news the last, I don't know, 6 months or so, because they did fail one of their ratio studies. So if a parish fails their ratio study, then the tax commission forces you to do a reassessment in an off year. Okay, but otherwise, you're mandated to do a statewide reassessment in those, 2012, 2014, 2020. Those are the normal reassessment cycles set by the state. You can do an off-year reassessment if you determine that there are erroneous values, if something's been, wrong or something like that. So you can do them in off years, or if the state mandates that you do it.
They would have at least been reassessed back in 12. If it's being done now? Correct.
Okay, so there's a lot that goes into reassessment, okay? When you're looking at a reassessment, what you have to look at are the ratios. And some of that's going to come up in the next section. I'm going to explain that. You look at the sales. You look at the ratio and how far out of line the values are compared to what the market says. So we're required to be between 90% and 110% of what the market says the value of this property is, okay? So if the ratio says these properties or this area is out of ratio, then we need to look at this area or this type of property or something like that. So that's what determines if that property is going to be reassessed.
So how much of an increase was the assessment for this piece of property, or the typical piece of property that he had?
It depends on how far out of ratio it is.
Okay. So
There's not a standard percentage.
I know
It depends on how
there's
far out of ratio it
there's
is.
a pretty good disparity between the number that he's calling for and the number that you're calling for.
Correct,
And it's kind of consistent across the board with all of them.
correct.
So is his numbers that he's claiming more in line with the way they were assessed last
I have
time?
no,
Or is he even
I-
shooting underneath that?
I don't know where his numbers are coming from because he hasn't provided me anything to justify his numbers.
Okay. Yeah. You got a little burden of proof involved in all this as well.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farnum. Any further questions? Okay, I think we had a motion by Mr. Barris, second.
No, that was from the, item 15.
That was the last one?
Yes.
You didn't erase on me.
No, I didn't erase on you.
Do we have a motion or we need a motion? Or please repeat your motion.
Motion to uphold valuation.
Motion by Mr. Hunter, second by Mr. Latour. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries.
Okay. So now we would move on to the hotels, and those are grouped by representatives. And I'm not sure if there are any other representatives here. Mr. Roberts or Mr. Mize? No?
I don't see anyone.
Mr. Patrick Powers? No? Mr. Dan Littard or TJ Shoneman? No. Okay, me. Okay, so what we were just discussing with the convenience stores, by law, when we do a reassessment, there's a lot that goes into reassessment. Of course, reassessment doesn't make me the most popular person in the room most of the time. However, the purpose behind reassessment is to bring properties up to fair market value and to correct inequities in the valuation, either within the area or within a property class that we have discovered when we do ratio studies, okay? And so basically what we do is we start looking at sales, and as I explained before, we're supposed to be within the 90 to 110% range of the sales values. And with those values set by the Louisiana Tax Commission, we go in and run sales reports. So what I provided you is the ratio. Let's see. I don't remember exactly how we put this in order. Give me just 1 second. I believe I gave you a printout that looks like this, that just kind of gives you the breakdown of a couple of bullet points on when we started the hotels, and gave you kind of a sample. When we started the hotels, you will see that we were at 54.67% ratio, which I would have failed a ratio study had the tax commission come in and done a ratio study on the hotels. As you can see, here are the sales that are on this list right here. These are the different hotels that are protesting, okay? This is actually the list of hotels, as you can see all my colors here. This is the list of hotels that I actually reviewed. We have over 60 hotels in our parish, and we reviewed, my office staff, all of us have reviewed all of these, okay? So what we did was we went through all the sales. We go through and we break down the hotels by class. We break down the hotels by scale, economy class, limited, upscale, mid-scale, and so full, you know. So there's a lot that goes into this. I just kind of want you guys to understand. I don't want to bore you to death, but okay, so based on the ratios, based on the sales, we came up with valuations on the hotels, okay? What we did at that point was adjust the valuations, send the letter, which I gave you a copy of, to the hotels to let them know, look, this is a state mandated reassessment. We understand that this is based on sales approach. We use 3 approaches to valuation. We use the sales approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. I understand that I've used the sales approach. I would like to help you in any way that I can, so if you would like me to work with you, please provide me your income. Provide me your audited financials. I will work with you in any way that I can. And I asked for that in August. The first week of August is when I sent these letters out, okay? So for a month, I didn't hear from anybody. The first week of September, I got an invitation to meet with, which I think I included in here for you guys, to meet with the hotel owners, and they said, you know, this is tough on us, and I said, I understand. I will work with you in any way I can. And met with them the next day, and please provide me audited financials. I will help you in any way I can. But at this point, here's where we are. based on the sales, these are my values. So what I would like to do is, based on the sales reports, this is where we stand. And I would like you to uphold my values at this point until they can provide me some way to help them. Questions?
Good job. Mr. Scott?
On the, so did they provide you with any of the finances you asked for?
The first set of financials I got was last Wednesday. Yes, the day before the last day to appeal. It takes some time to go through those. And I did include that information in what I gave you guys, which on here, I gave you who has given me financials, who has not given me financials. And I will continue to work with them beyond this point. But until I can get the opportunity to go through, and I'm continuing to get financials and continuing to make appointments. I have appointments next week with several of the hotel owners. I will continue to work with them. But based on the sales that I have, the values are in line until they can provide me and I can go through the information that they do provide me. So I would ask you to uphold my values based on what I have.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Farnum?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess the thing that catches my eye on this is some of these numbers are really far apart.
Yes, they are.
And, you know, I hate to kick the can on down the road to the state for them to take this up when maybe we could resolve this with a little more time. Questions to Mr. Gabb: do we have the latitude to defer action on this particular item, since there is such a large crowd with huge disparities in the number? Do we have that ability to?
Unfortunately, I don't think you do. I think the tax rolls have to be certified. And again, I'll defer to Ms. Aguilar on this question as well. But I don't think this can be deferred.
It cannot be deferred, but I do have my legal counsel here if you guys would like to ask him as well.
I believe. So with that, I would make a motion that we uphold the valuation.
Okay, got a motion by Mr. Farnum and a second by Mr. Latour.
And if I may, Mr. Farnum, would the motion be to uphold all of the remaining assessments?
Well, we need to do it
We
one at a
still have,
time.
did you have some discussion, Mr. Gilbert?
Yes, and also, Mr. Hunter.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Gabb, if we give the permission tonight to go ahead, then that mean if she go back and reassess it, that she not gonna go lower, right?
Well, the next step would be for any aggrieved party, the taxpayer, to proceed to the Louisiana State Tax Commission. And that is their right to do, and they'll have another avenue to appeal there. And if they're not happy there, they can go to the 14th Judicial District Court. That's the process has to be taken.
Okay.
But as Mr. Farnum stated before, there's a burden on the taxpayer here to provide the information. It's not enough to just appeal. You've got to provide a lot more than that.
Mr. Hunter.
Mr. Hunter?
And you gentlemen and ladies, I think most of you know me well enough to know that if the taxpayer, the property owner, will provide me information that can help them, I will work with them. There's no doubt about it. But they have to give me something to work with.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Gabb, I think we've already said it, but I just want to say it again. What we're doing tonight is looking at valuation only. We're not considering the methodology. We're not considering what properties were chosen this year. The police jury is simply looking at the valuations and asking if those are in line.
That is
with-
correct.
And we, as a body, have to rely on our tax assessor to do their job with these valuations.
You're absolutely correct. And that's why the statute even says that we're to rely on Ms. Aguilar for her advisory capacity.
Okay. Ms. Aguilar, may I ask, what is an LAT-5?
An LAT-5 is a personal property rendition that goes out to all business properties that have assets in our parish or in any parish in the state of Louisiana. They are to report their business assets to that particular parish that they have business assets in. And they're required to report those every year to each parish that they have assets in.
I'm sure my CPA has done that for me
I'm
well.
sure.
I didn't personally know what it was. I yield. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Little green bar paper.
That's it. It
It's
comes
thick.
green bar,
It
yes.
comes in the
yes,
mail, yes.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Latour.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate basically what Ms. Wendy said. I've actually ran into something fairly similar, and I basically felt it wasn't right, so I got an appraisal, and Ms. Wendy and her office actually did make a reduction on my taxes, or, you know, in another case,
Valuation.
I was evaluation.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Valuation, and, you know, basically, if you feel like you are not paying or something's not right, just get an appraisal, bring her proof, and she'll take care of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It could go up, too.
Yeah, you're one of the lucky ones.
She just goes by the law, that's
I
it.
just go by the law.
It's
That's
black and
right,
white.
Mr. Landry, that's right.
I've been on both sides of that.
I've had a number of calls in the last month, and I tell them all, look, hey, believe me, she's going by the book.
I go by the book, yes,
If you can
sir.
prove otherwise, she'll help you.
I
and-
will,
but,
absolutely.
When she
absolutely.
looks at it again, you know, you might ought to be thankful for what you have now.
Any other questions that I can answer?
Anybody on that one? Okay, we had a motion and a second on the floor, no further discussion, motion carries. Are we,
Anything
is
else?
that, was that the last one?
I think as a whole, if we did all of the hotels
Got
as a
them all?
whole, we're
Okay.
done.
All right, we did.
Thank
Any
you
other
all
questions?
for your time. Anything else I can answer for
Yeah,
you?
nobody's here to
Thank
talk
you
on.
very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Wendy.
Y'all have a good evening.
Okay, let's see, we're going back to item 15. And we were at the point, I think Ms. Patrick, Lisa Broussard Patrick.
I'm really surprised on that.
Sorry for the interruption. If you could, Ms. Patrick, please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Lisa Broussard Patrick, and I reside at 6005 Row Road in Vinton, Louisiana.
Okay, and you have 2 minutes from now.
Yes, sir, thank you. Zoning and development in Calcasieu Parish was adopted for the purpose of promoting the public health and safety, the morals and general welfare of the community. This was taken directly from the zoning website. The zoning notification in this case said that because minimal impacts are to be expected, the staff recommended that the request be granted, and such was done so on a 5-4 vote on Tuesday. But we, the citizens of Calcasieu Parish and the residents of and surrounding Row Road, completely disagree with the impact assessment. Meeting the needs of our community involves appropriate development which won't detract from our quality of life. What we see as a broader vision for our community does not include the infringements resulting from a 30-unit RV park on a quiet, dead-end residential street. We're going to demonstrate those negative impacts, the maximum negative impacts, the traffic hazards and public risk, street damage and added maintenance costs, risk to the environment and infrastructure, increased stormwater runoff and flooding consequences, risk of improper and illegal activities, damaged real estate marketability, and reduced property value. Take a drive with me along Row Road, and you're going to see a quiet, tree-lined street where single-family homes and children play in the front yards. They still play in the streets with their parents tagging along behind them. And the notion that there are no children on the street, I think if I asked all of the children in this audience tonight and the parents who have children on Longborough Road, you would see a different demonstration that shows you how the property owner does not recognize the makeup of this quiet residential community. It's a narrow street, only 18 feet in width at the furthest point. There is no shoulder on Row Road. There's only a ditch on each side. It has a sharp curve at midpoint. And we, the residents of this neighborhood, know that we have to be careful because of the obstructions from our view that this presents. So imagine trucks pulling 8.5 wide RVs.
I'm sorry, ma'am, your time's up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. See, we have Thad Daly. I think that may be Daly.
They agree, 2 minutes per, and there's 10 speakers.
Mr. Daly, you're not going to speak? I mean, you don't have to. It's completely up to you. If you would, please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Thad Daly. I live at 6070 Patrick Lane, right through the woods from this property, okay? Y'all are well aware that the Interstate 10 went under in March. The weigh station had 3.5 foot of water in it. The weigh station is right across from that land. I waded in to check my property, came down Bro Road, went through the woods there, okay? Where I cut through, you can see the houses there by the point, was almost chest deep. Okay, Freddie Patrick's got pictures of the water on that land, but Freddie Patrick's pictures were taken before it crested. Okay, now if you turn that pond into an oxidation pond, all that stuff in that pond is going to be all over the neighborhood. It's a health hazard. Okay, he says 7 acres. How much of that 7 acres is that pond? He says Bro Road has no traffic. It has low rate traffic because there's not many people there. But whole 90 goes to Bro Road, which has a very high amount of traffic. All the people going to fish at the Burnout Bridge. Like this morning, I went down there while the sheriff pulled a car out of the Burnout Bridge. There was 18 boats down there, boat trailers. That's how much traffic's on that, and that's a weekday. So there's more to this than what he said. It is a high travel area just off of Bro Road to get to Bro Road. The pond I see is a hazard to our health. They say that flood in March was a freak. We've had 4 of those freaks since 1990, 4 of them, each one of them worse. Then we had Ike storm surge come through. That pond, if it's an oxidation pond, is going to flush all over the neighborhood. I would give her remaining time.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Next, we have Wendy Thibodeau. Mr. Crane, did you wish to speak?
I was just going to say, the pond, the plan that they're submitted to us, it's not showing that the existing pond is an oxidation pond. They're putting in a sewer treatment plant.
Sewer treatment plant, no oxidation pond. Thank you, Mr. Crane. Ms. Thibodeau, if you could please state your name and address for the record, please. You have 2 minutes.
Wendy Thibodeau, 5903 Bro Road, Benton, Louisiana.
Thank you.
Me and my family, we live on the corner of Bro Road and Old 90. As he states, there are 7 probably residents down that street. My son is currently 10 years old, so to say that there are no children there is not a true assessment. I have concerns about the fact that you have 30 vehicles coming up and down my road every day, even if they are workers. I no longer can let my child safely play outside without monitoring him. Mind you, he's 10. I do teach school for a living, so I understand. I understand the hazards. I understand what goes into it. To say that these are all going to be working class people and there's going to be no other thing, you can't vet that. There's no way to ensure that those are all working people. There's no way to ensure that all the people that you lease to have good intentions. I know that's part of, I can't control who moves into my neighborhood anyway, but you're having people with no ties, nothing to tie them to my community other than a part-time job that they're going to come to and then eventually leave. They have no vested interest in Benton. They don't spend their time there. They're going to bring their children into our schools. Most of those people travel. As a school teacher, I can tell you children that move from place to place do poorer in school because of the fact that they are moved from pillar to post. That's going to bring our scores down at our school, bring our schools down, and overcrowd our classrooms.
That all?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thibodeau. Next, we have, I think it's Gina Swinburne. If you would, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Gina Swinburne, 6079 Patrick Lane, Benton, Louisiana. At the bend of that road right there is 100 feet from my street to the corner of that property. Beyond the end of the property where he says is a dead-end road, there is a residence with 2 small children living back there. They have access to the road, my road, and those children play in that road. If he's only looking at the street that he wants to put his facility on, then he's extremely short-sighted, because that's not the only thing he will affect. There's an entire community there, not one street, and there are 10 residences on Bro Road, not 3 or 4. He doesn't live there. He doesn't understand the way this community works, nor the people on it, nor can he guarantee that the people he houses on that street will stay on that street. I'm not saying anything against construction workers, migrant workers. They're human beings just like the rest of us. But he himself said it's at the end of a very secluded road. That lends credence for those people who want to be subversive to find a place to be. We don't want that in my backyard. My husband is also a Vietnam veteran, and he would like to live out his remaining years with his children and his grandchildren in a place that he thinks is safe, residential area, where there are not 120 vehicle trips being made up and down the road. If you assume all of these are working people, and they all have a vehicle, and they all go in and out of that road. I'm the same person who filed a complaint with the DOTD because of the issues we already have with traffic coming from that interstate and the way traffic is purged through there. It's already a hazard. That has nothing to do with Mr. Stanley. He will just make it, Mr. Floyd, he will just make it worse. I don't think any of us have anything against the man in general. We just do not want those recreational vehicles in our backyards, which is where they will be. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Swinburne. Next, we have Mr. Fred Patrick. Mr. Patrick, if you would, please state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Fred Patrick. I live at 6005 Bro Road, directly adjacent to this property. I think most people that spoke ahead of me have brought up a lot of the points that I wanted to bring up. I did want to bring up a point that there are 8 residences on that street that are either here tonight or were here Tuesday or have sent letters in their own file that live on Bro Road that oppose this. Just wanted to bring that up. I'm concerned about construction traffic to build up this property and what it's going to do to the road, the infrastructure, that traffic, big, huge dump trucks going down the road that road is not designed for. I'm concerned with RV park traffic once it's in operation, and I think that's already been stated how many that will be. I'm concerned with the safety of the permanent residents in that community. I think that's about all I have to say. Everybody else covered a lot of things I wanted to say.
All right, thank you, Mr. Patrick.
Any questions?
I don't think so. Not yet. Leo Paul Thibodeau. Mr. Thibodeau, if you would, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I'm Leo Paul Thibodeau. I reside at 5903 Bro Road, Vinton, Louisiana, and I hereby oppose the case RZ0705016, which would allow construction of a 30-space RV park at 6015 Bro Road. You can't see my actual residence. My wife spoke earlier, Wendy. Our house is at the corner of Bro Road, which means, and 90, which means every vehicle, along with the neighbors, has to pass us to get to this proposed park. Like Mr. Patrick said, most everyone's already covered everything. The biggest thing I want to address here is the children in the streets, okay? It's not a residential area. The kids, there's several of them here tonight that do play on that road because Highway 90 is so busy. They will travel by bicycle, walk, however, excuse me, and come to that side road and do what kids and boys do in that area, play around the ditches and such. And in more than one occasion, I will go out there and address it with the children in the street to be very careful at the end of that road, because when people come off of 90, a lot of folks that are lost that don't live down there trying to get back to Texas, leaving, will come through there at pretty good speed. So I tell the kids to watch, and I tell them to get off the road and get on my property as well. I don't have too much more to add, other than there was a comment made about there's representation here of more of the people that may not actually live on Bro Road. and there's a reason for that. Those folks have kids. Those are, folks are interested, or have interest in the neighborhood. And like I said, I'm not gonna repeat all the previous.
Thank you, Mr. Thibodeau. Mr. Greg Tubble? I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Greg Turbyville. I live at 2472 Old Highway 90. My driveway is about 300 foot to the south of Row Road. I see and hear just about all the traffic. You know, traffic on Highway 90 is very fast-paced in front of my house. And I oppose the RV park for just quality of life in our neighborhood, safety of my family, my neighbors. Mr. Stan Floyd, he will take the profits from this back to Texas, where he's from. They won't benefit our community at all. So I don't really see the reason to have it back there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Michael Quinton? Please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Michael Quinton. My address is 6076 Patrick Lane, Vinton, Louisiana. I come here tonight because I have 3 kids that know the children on Borough Road. They play with the children on Borough Road. There's been a cut made through the woods for them to be able to go through the woods and not have to go all the way around by Old 90. My concern is you got these 16, 18, 20, 30-foot campers, RVs coming in, and the road's so narrow that even with the boats that we have coming down there, they cannot maintain their lane. The school bus will not go down Borough Road because it's so narrow. There's no turnaround. So now you got 20, 30-foot campers coming in, and it doesn't matter which way you go, the camper's not going to stay in its original lane. It's either going to have to swing out wide, or you're going to wind up ditching it. There's no way around it. I drive a truck for a living. I see it every day. And for the safety of the kids, our whole life out there, we stick up for each other, no matter what the situation is. And it would not be good. There's not enough room, and we're a secluded neighborhood. We stick together and stay together. So, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Quinton. Last, Mr. Frank Mancha. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Frank Mancha. I live at 5995 Borough Road. Thank you, Mr. President, council members. I'm opposing this RV for pretty much what everybody says here. I do have grandchildren. My grandchildren have friends that come out. They love to come to the country. To sit there and say that there's no children on that road, I don't understand that, but whatever. My concern is the narrowness of the road. I don't own an RV myself, but if an RV was to come down during the night, I don't know how they operate. There's no lighting on that road at all. There is a bad curve in there. We, as a community out there on Borough Road, are well aware of that. We're all very careful. And I think it'll affect the quality of our lives out there. I've lived there for 30 years. My neighbors have been there a long time also. So I'm in opposition to this, and hopefully you'll take that in consideration. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Any
sir.
questions?
I don't think so. Okay, Mr. Scott, go ahead.
I have a couple questions for Mr. Connor and Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane, can you explain to me some of the uses that C2 allow? Because this property is C2 that we're talking about.
Well, the property was zoned back in 2010 to C2 to allow Mr. Floyd to actually establish an airboat service and office facility. And so, but it was originally zoned back in the 80s, the early 80s, to C1, light commercial. So that would allow for several types of commercial businesses to be located there. In order for him to do any type of C2 business other than the airboat sales, he would have to come back before the Planning and Zoning Board and this police jury to amend the site plan to be able to do that.
Could you just name a few C1s that he could put there right now? I mean, I hate to put you on the spot. And
I don't have it in front of me.
I mean, because obviously, commercial traffic would still be allowed on this road if he was to do whatever he wanted to do, C1 or come back and change a C2. It still takes commercial traffic to support that business. So I'm just curious, what kind of business?
Yeah, so in in C1, permitted uses, you got things like animal hospitals, bakeries, business and professional offices, churches, convenience stores, fix-it shops, funeral homes, laundromats, restaurants, no alcohol beverage sold on premise, and then similar other retail, stores that are convenient to the neighborhood.
All right, thank you. Mr. Connor, can you speak to this road a little bit? Is it up to the standards that the parish had? I mean, is it in good shape? I mean, can you give us a brief on the road?
Mr. Scott, I'm going to have to disclose something here, first of all. I didn't know this until tonight, but my brother is providing engineering services for Mr. Floyd, so I really can't inject into this conversation because my board would look at this as could be an ethics conflict. So I would rather just back out of that. Now, we do have Public Works here, and they could comment on the, as far as the road and
Mr. Wainwright here tonight?
Yes, sir.
Or Mr. Freelow? Mr. Wainwright, if you could come to the podium and answer Mr. Scott's question to the best of your ability.
Apologies, I didn't think I'd be involved in this.
That's no problem. Please repeat your question.
Can you speak to the Bro Road, how well it's built? Is it in bad shape? Is it too narrow? I mean, can you give us a... Tim can.
No, sir, I can't either. I mean, in terms of meeting any kind of standard for this type of development, I'm not in a position to answer it cold, that's for sure.
Mr. Gabb, let me ask Mr. Gabb, I'm asking about the condition of a road, not a principle that's gonna, he can't tell me about that.
And I can't either. I don't know the condition of the road.
All right, then I'm good. I'm good.
I would think it's up to parish standard.
Yeah, I would think so.
That's what we do, so I'll answer it for you and go out on a limb and say that it's up to the standard. If it was not, then they would be on it and correct it.
Yeah.
Mr. Crane, go ahead.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Connor.
I believe I can comfortably say that it does suit its current need as far as residential getting in and out. I think that's obvious because there's residents that live on that. It is hard surfaced, and we do maintain our roads, as you're aware, in very good shape. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
You satisfied, Mr. Scott? Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. President. You must have been on the same wavelength as me because I had the exact same question. I am curious, you said this was zoned general commercial C2 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2010.
2010, okay. If Mr. Floyd wanted to put, let's say, mobile homes on this location, he would have to get it rezoned as well?
That's correct.
How many mobile homes could he put based on I mean, how many acres is this property?
17.
I think his property was 7.5 acres.
Do you have an estimate, if it were zoned correctly, how many mobile homes he could put on this property?
Well, if he had a mobile home park, if he zoned it to mobile home park, then 5,000 square foot of land area per unit is allowed
Okay.
for a mobile home park.
I have a history degree, not a math degree. You can't do some math for me? All right, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Barris.
About 40.
Thank you, Mr. President.
There's only about 5 years.
I drove down that road Wednesday. I like to put my eyes on things. And as I drove down that road, the further I went, I guess I'm claustrophobic. And it's like, wow, this is tight. And then I come to the end, and I was looking for the spot where it was going to be, and I finally see the sign, and I get there, and I just looked around, and I was like, man, it's just tight, and it just doesn't. To me, it's a square peg in a round hole, man. As I went down to Bro Road, I passed an RV park on the frontage there that wasn't even full. Take that for what it's worth. But going back to the road itself, it is, I believe, to the minimum. The minimum standard width. But what's that mean when you're talking about large vehicles like this? I live out in an area talking about the potential residents, tenants, whatever, there, the out-of-state traffic, and I live in the area of Carlos, and believe me, if you don't think that the out-of-town folks are going to come in and respect your traffic laws and your speed limits and all that, and everybody's just going to, be all chummy and get along, that's not the case. It ain't going to happen. You're going to have speeding. If you don't live there, if you're not from there, you don't respect there. So, I'm really not a fan of the idea there. With that, I yield back, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Barris. Okay, is there any further discussion? Thank you, Mr. Wainwright. We appreciate you coming up. Okay. Mr. Floyd, you may come back up and do a rebuttal for up to a maximum of 4 minutes.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for another opportunity to come up here. I'll tell you one of the first things that I noticed when I came over to first look at that property. That is a very nice paved road. And it is narrow, but I'm sure it meets the requirements for the parish. I would do everything I could do to make sure speed signs or a sign for the small curve, which is probably only a 20-degree, 25-degree curve. I'm willing to limit the trailers from 30 to back it down to 25. And I do have an RV park in Orange, Texas. We screen people coming in. We make sure they do not have dogs. We make sure they do not have children. We want working class people that leave at 6 o'clock in the morning. They come back in 6, 7 o'clock in the evenings. Of course, you can't control everything, but I will do my best and my staff to make sure that that is a quality park. And I've made friends with a lot of those residents. Their children do fish in my pond. They swim in my pond without asking. But I've never made any issues about it. I just worry about their safety. I love children. I have my first great-grandson this year. And, as you all know, it is a very low-traffic area. I would like questions, you know, if y'all have questions for me, I'd appreciate questions.
I just have one comment. I noticed in the stipulations, it doesn't say anything in there, Mr. Crane, about limiting the size of the RV. He mentioned going from 30 to 25, but the stipulation in there doesn't say anything about a size. So it would be appropriate to add that stipulation now before we vote as a motion, just in case. I mean, Mr. Gadd?
Well, Mr. Scott, right now, the motion is to overturn.
Oh, to overturn.
If that motion were to fail, at that point, stipulations could be added.
Okay. I just didn't want to miss it if so.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Back to
President.
Mr. Barris.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, a while ago, there weren't any kids, and now there's kids swimming in the pond.
Sir, those children come through the woods behind my property, and when I bought the property, there was a trail established there. But the kids continue to come there. I don't, like I say, I don't mind them swimming or fishing. I only worry about the, you know, kids drowning on my property or getting hurt on my property. There are woods surrounded. You got interstate on one side, you've got woods on the back. Some of the people that are, you know, are not happy about this. One of them lives as much as 3/4 miles away on totally different roads. Talking about the traffic on Highway 90. It's an old highway. It does go out to a fishing area where a boat landing, but there's really not much traffic on that road, but that really has nothing to do with the traffic on Bro Road.
Okay, Mr. Floyd, your time is up.
Okay. Well, thank y'all very much.
Thank you. We may have another question for you before you go back. Mr. Farnham.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Is it for Mr. Floyd or?
No, it's not for Mr.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Floyd.
Yes, sir.
This is probably a pretty tough question, too, because it's probably goes back way before your time here, but typically when we went through zoning many years ago when it was established, zoning areas were pretty much the same. And how did a piece of sea property get stuck out in the middle of an agricultural area? I mean, it's probably a pretty tough question. Probably a question with no answer.
That is a pretty tough
I mean,
question.
Everything as far as you can see on the GIS map, it's all agricultural.
You know, I think
And then there's a piece of.
there were times, I guess, when they were, you know, going through the comprehensive zoning process, they were going to different areas and meeting with different people, and landowners were coming in and submitting information. And there may have been some sort of, I don't know, commercial activity on that property at one time that the landowner, you know, wanted to keep that.
It was probably by request then.
Yeah, it may have been by request.
Okay.
I don't know.
I guess, you know, it looks like maybe 3 acres of the 7 acres is actually solid land. I'm guessing by what I'm seeing here, is that the majority of the property is water.
Yeah, the pond takes up.
So probably if you were to put mobile homes on it, there'd probably only be room for about 20 or less mobile homes. Probably much fewer. So, okay, that was just a question. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Farnham. Is there any further discussion by any of the jurors? All right, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Barris and a second by Mr. Farnham to overturn planning and zoning, which would mean to deny the request. Everybody understand the motion? Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Yes vote mean.
Clarify. A reverse roll call vote. Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. McMillan? Ms. Mayo? Yes. Mr. Latour?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
No.
Mr. Guillory?
No.
Farnham?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes.
Mr. Barris?
Yes.
Motion carried. 7 yeas and 3 nays, so the motion carried to overturn the planning and zoning and deny the request.
Thank you, Miss Kathy. We will, I guess, why don't we have a little recess for 2 minutes before we go on? Before we go to item 17, 16.